Perhaps the most faithful episode thus far, long-standing theories getting even more evidence, everyone's favorite giraffes finally making their debut, and of course, another week means another tragedy. Today I'm back to recap episode 9 of The Last of Us and talk about all the smaller details you might have missed, game parallels, and plenty of behind-the-scenes information. There are no future spoilers in this one, so if this is your first venture into the world of The Last of Us, fret not, you are in safe territory. The episode begins with a cold open as we see Anna, played by the original voice actress of Ellie, Ashley Johnson, running away from infected. In the game, we never really hear anything about Ellie's parents, bar like a note and some implied mentions. But Neil says that there was always a desire to expand on that, with there always being plans of some sort of spin-off where Anna would be introduced, but the plans just always fell through. With how much of The Last of Us story is about these protectors, parental bonds, etc., I think it only makes sense that we would hear some backstory of Ellie's. Similarly, the fact that Ashley Johnson is ultimately the one to play Ellie's mom makes perfect sense considering how much she shaped Ellie's character during the production of the first game. Ellie's love of space, for example, comes directly from Ashley herself. And so, to an extent, Ashley is kind of Ellie's mom in the sense that she sort of raised the character of Ellie. And yes, once again, I did get a good chuckle of how just uncanny this entire thing was. Because Ashley literally just sounds like Ellie and my mind was doing a double take with every single word she said. Though the huge thing here is her getting bits before giving birth to Ellie, as it further corroborates some very long-standing theories about Ellie's immunity. Obviously, we never really get a concrete explanation of whether or not any of this is relevant. But the theory of Ellie's immunity stemming from the fact that she was born from someone who was infected has been thrown around a number of times. And Anna being bitten literally moments before cutting the umbilical cord does seem to add evidence to that. Newborns obviously have an absolute ton of stem cells, which have long been speculated to be the key to unlocking a ridiculous number of ways to extend human life, as stem cells can quite literally become any cell that is required in the body. And so, perhaps because baby Ellie was exposed to the fungus and it somehow latched onto these stem cells, she developed this immunity because it could never take over her brain. Something we know usually happens very quickly. Again, technically none of this is ever set in stone, but there are plenty of in-depth theories you can dive into online. Another interesting angle this opens up is the unfortunate continuation of the trend where people fail to protect Ellie, and Joel is ultimately the only exception. If you remember Ellie's line of,
"Everybody I have cared for has either died or left me."
Well, that very much holds even as far back as her very first moments alive. After the intro though, we see Marlene and the Fireflies find Anna and the newborn Ellie. Anna of course tells Marlene to find someone who will raise Ellie and passes on the now signature knife. Though importantly, it also establishes the through line of lies in this episode, as Anna tells Marlene that she cut the umbilical cord before she was bit, something we know for an absolute fact to not be true. Similarly, I think you could also draw parallels between Anna begging to be put down here and Marlene struggling, to the very end where Marlene is begging for mercy but Joel never even flinching, with the protection of Ellie being that constant through line here. On top of that, this also immediately establishes the duality of Ellie's biggest protectors, those of course being Joel and Marlene. Both ultimately give it their absolute all to make sure that she is safe, but the biggest difference comes from their worldviews. Joel was ultimately ready to sacrifice the entirety of the world to protect her and keep her by his side, whereas Marlene literally gave up Ellie to Fedra, the mortal enemies of the Fireflies, not because she wanted to offload the burden of looking after her, but simply because she knew that it would be the safest place for her. And the last absolutely genius thing we see here is the smash cut between this close-up on Ellie as a baby to her in the present day, immediately painting a very stark contrast between the innocence of childhood and the now very traumatized Ellie post-David. Similarly, just like the game, we opened the spring with a complete 180 to what we'd seen thus far with Joel and Ellie. Leading up to this point, Ellie was always the one talking about anything and everything, be it random questions about their surroundings, very punny jokes, or going to the moon. She was always the one bantering around. Now, on the other hand, Joel is the one just desperately trying to get through to her. And also notice how he deliberately mentions everything they've been through. Everything from saying he should teach her how to play guitar, referencing his supposed singing career, mentioning Chef Boyardee, of course referencing their first nights camping out, etc, etc. Almost as if to blatantly say, hey, do you remember the good times? We can still do all of that. As their final stretch of the journey continues though, we end up in this collapsed building of sorts where we go full on video game and Joel says he'll boost Ellie up to get the ladder. And like, man, imagine if The Last of Us was a video game. I would play the out of that. Wait. Though again, Joel also notes that Ellie is being extra quiet today, which both continues that trend of depicting the now much more hurt Ellie, and also setting up that air of the journey is almost over. And this is one of those things that I found surprising how differently I perceived from the game. Because originally, while the Ellie David scene in the game was exactly as gruesome as it was in the show, probably because there was that extra degree of separation, I always read this final stretch as Ellie being quiet exactly because their journey is coming to a close and that just scares her. Keep in mind that they have been traveling together for the better part of a year. In the show, on the other hand, I couldn't help but focus on the trauma from David, and the ending of their journey was just more so the final straw. But point is, Ellie is just not doing so well. That is, of course, until we get to yet another one of my most anticipated scenes, them seeing the giraffes. And oh boy, did the duo absolutely nail this sequence. Obviously, it's meant to function as this last moment of breather between them, with them even deliberately referencing the very start of their journey and her saying,
"You can't deny that view."
But man, you can't deny that view.
But above all of that, notice Joel here, because this entire day he's been trying to break through to her. Clearly he knows that she is hurting, and all he can do as a parent is just try to talk to her about it. But in this moment, Ellie's shield drops and that childhood wonder shines once again. And so, Joel just looks on because he knows that she is still in there. And man, does Pedro just nail that proud dad look. And in a broader sense, particularly in a story like The Last of Us, I think they always nail that angle of the beauty of nature once humanity has crumbled. In these apocalyptic series, usually we tend to focus on the destroyed rubble and everything is just dark and hopeless. But here, nature reclaiming the cities is oddly peaceful and beautiful. The once urban jungle is becoming just a jungle. Maybe it's just me really liking these apocalyptic sceneries, but I just thought it was always super neat with The Last of Us, more so than most other apocalyptic stories. After their brief day trip to the apocalypse version of the zoo though, we get a departure from the game and another long-standing theory being confirmed. We do also pass by these medical camps in the game, and some lines of dialogue are consistent between the two versions, though there is one major difference here. Joel mentions how these were set up right after the fall, and then mentions that he was also in one of them. First off, notice how casually Ellie is now talking about Sarah. Thus far, the mere mention of her name or even memory sent Joel into a bit of a frenzy. But now, they have grown so close that they can openly talk about those they've lost. But the big thing here is of course Joel saying, no, it wasn't with Sarah, she was already gone. It was me, I was the guy who shot and missed. Referencing their conversation about Joel's scar way back in episode 3. In the game, there is this scene of Joel and Ellie finding a dead couple in a bathtub and Ellie saying that they took the easy way out. Only for Joel to respond, there is nothing easy about it. And so, people speculated that this sort of response might hint toward Joel also attempting Sudoku, something that in the TV version at least is now 100% confirmed. And then of course comes the salt in the wound as he says, it wasn't time that healed all wounds, clearly referencing both Tess and now Ellie. But to brush off some of that sadness, he then says that he is in the mood for some puns. And so, it is very much punny time. In the game, this very last section is very different. In short, Joel and Ellie have to swim through this tunnel of sorts, but Ellie of course doesn't know how to swim. And so, when they get caught up in the stream, she almost drowns. Joel pulls her out of the water, and it's as he tries resuscitating her that the Fireflies suddenly appear behind them. It's effectively one final reminder of how Joel views Ellie before we get to the hospital. Because here, even while literally being held up at gunpoint, he never even gives them a second thought and simply says that they need to save Ellie. The show, on the other hand, is a tad more cheeky. where, just like the grandma showing signs of infection back in the premiere, some dudes casually appear in the background and they are then stunned by some flash grenades or stun grenades or whatever they are. Though as they're captured, we get that incredible contrast of us momentarily thinking that we are doomed. What just happened? We were so close and now we are taken? But no, because while their welcoming might not have quite been the red carpet, these are indeed the Fireflies. Technically, we have reached our goal. But of course, this is The Last of Us. And following this point, the show effectively replicates the game basically one for one. Marlene tells Joel that Ellie is being prepped for surgery, but of course, no more than a few seconds later, Joel has pieced it together and immediately asks, wait, they want to extract the cordyceps? The cordyceps grows in the brain, she'll die. And as you might suspect, and probably also seen a few headlines, everything following this point has been debated for many years. I mean, this is literally the trolley problem, right? Similarly, many people have taken a very scientific approach of trying to prove that Joel does do the right thing here, arguing that there is literally zero scientific proof of a cure being possible, etc, etc. But what all of those arguments seem to be forgetting is that Joel is not a scientist. For him, this decision is ultimately the people here and potentially the rest of humanity versus Ellie. It's as simple as that. It is just the ultimate trolley problem. And this also once again draws a very clear line between Marlene and Joel. Because yes, Marlene did protect Ellie, but she's also a very pragmatic leader. The Fireflies have lasted so long exactly because she makes these sacrifices for what she believes to be the greater good. So yes, she doesn't want to. She made a promise to Anna to protect her after all. But she is ready to sacrifice Ellie with the potential of developing a cure. For her, this is a numbers game. Even if there is a 0.1% chance of the cure working, it is just a single person. But again, remember that she never raised Ellie. She doesn't have that personal connection to her. In fact, she even implicitly acknowledges it herself, telling the guard to later give Ellie's knife to Joel, just like Anna did to Ellie. It's effectively her way of saying, she was yours, have this to remember her by. And yes, unlike her, Joel has saved Ellie, she has saved him. And above all, clearly he views her as family. From his perspective, this is not a rational choice, that is the point, this is 100% emotional. And Neil here also adds exactly that, saying that when they were making the first game, they ran this little test to see how people responded to Joel's choice, where non-parents would essentially be split, with half saying, yes, I would do the same, and half saying, no, Joel was the villain all along and he doomed humanity. But when they asked parents, it was 100% yes, Joel did do the right thing. And purely anecdotally, I've also seen some of you leaving comments saying that after you became a parent, your perspective on The Last of Us also changed drastically. So the point here is that it is not a coincidence that Marlene and Joel play the rational and emotional argument here. You are meant to be conflicted, and that is exactly why the probability of the cure is also never mentioned. It is important for Joel that he is completely blind in this decision. He doesn't know whether she can survive, he doesn't know whether a cure is possible, he has to choose between humanity and Ellie. Meanwhile, Marlene also plays the numbers game. If a probability of a cure exists at all, she will play it. It is just one person. And with that, we get to the staircase where we see this flashing light, pretty blatantly hinting at Joel snapping at literally any moment. And he very much does. Remember, he has been on both sides, right? And so he enters full-on hunter mode. And man, did I love the way they chose to portray this sequence. This is not an adrenaline rush or fight for survival. This isn't some huge triumph or something we should even necessarily want to see. It becomes this dissociative sequence of Joel just going through and shooting them one by one. And Craig here also adds that, saying that this isn't him being incredibly skilled or anything. It is just a mental thing. Everyone else in the room is panicking. Joel, on the other hand, is calm as ice. He knows what he needs to do. He has both figuratively and very literally set his sights on his targets. And so, he just walks through the building, picking off everyone one by one. It's not an action sequence, it's largely a tragedy that he has to do this. This isn't meant to be your, oh, this is so brutal, I love it. You are meant to be conflicted. The fact that Joel would choose to hide all of this later kind of speaks for itself. And as much as I hate these constant comparisons, For those of you who have seen The Walking Dead, obviously no spoilers, but you'll also immediately be able to think of all of those dissociative times where he just went on. It's not even rage, it's nothing. He is just sort of there and doing what he needs to do. And what I think best encapsulates that is when we see one of them surrender. But without ever even flinching, Joel just shoots him. This is 100% utilitarian. He doesn't care that he surrenders. He could pick up a gun and shoot him in the back. He might alert someone, he might attack him from behind. And so, he just removes that possibility. It's as simple as, if you are the least bit likely to stand in the way of my goal, well, you'll die. And in terms of game parallels, just like the game, Joel also gets the M4 or M16, gun bros, don't get mad, no one cares, the final weapon in the game. And with that, Joel makes it to the operating room where he shoots the doctor, because again, he showed even the tiniest signs of resistance. He does spare the nurses though, telling them to patch up even the small wound left behind by the IV. And also, fun fact, Laura Bailey, the VA of a certain someone, actually cameos as one of the nurses here. Obviously, it's not the same character, but if you know, you know. In the game, this is followed by another gameplay section where everything is just flashing red and it's hectic to the max as you just try to escape with Ellie. The show, on the other hand, jumps right to the elevator, and right after that, Marlene popping out. If you remember the comic I mentioned way back, in the game, that comic page Ellie shows has an uncanny resemblance to Marlene bleeding out here. So I think it's just some pretty on-the-nose foreshadowing of this ultimate showdown. But again, a good 95% of what we see here, even down to the dialogue, is taken right out of the game. Marlene tries talking him down, Joel obviously realizes the gravity of the situation, and it's then that we smash cut to Joel riding in the car. And the direction here is simply excellent, and perfectly complements the conflicted nature of everything we had seen thus far. Just like the game, we never see Ellie at first, which obviously insinuates the fact that Joel left her behind, right? And the fact that this assumption exists in your mind in the first place, I think already proves the fact that everything here is meant to be a shade of grey. If you truly 100% believe that Joel is in the right in what he is doing, would you ever question whether he ultimately left her behind? But whatever the case, the whole double narrative here is replicated one for one, with Joel lying to Ellie about what happened as we are given the true story through flashbacks. And that final line from Joel is just excellent, where Marlene begs him to spare her, saying, "Fine, it's over, you can go." But again, for Joel, ironically just like it is for Marlene with Ellie in the first place, it is a numbers game. If you are even the tiniest bit likely to come after her, you won't make it. And so, he simply says,
"You just come after her."
And with that, again, just like the game, we cut to their car being dead, and them having to hike the last bit back to Jackson, or in the game it's the dam, but it's the same deal. And yet again, Joel is the one chatting up a storm. And importantly, we now swap to play as Ellie. Ultimately, this very final stretch of gameplay could have been a cutscene. But it's not, and we are firmly planted in the shoes of Ellie because we as the player should now too feel a little distant from Joel and be questioning what he just did. As for Joel though, he talks about how Sarah and Ellie would have been friends, etc, etc, which again is just further hammering home the complicated duality of their relationship at this point. Joel is straight up comparing her to his daughter. Ellie, on the other hand, is as distant as she has ever been. Which takes us to the very final sequence, where Ellie stops him, telling him the story of what happened to Riley, yet again drawing that line of, "I am telling you this. Is there anything you want to tell to me?" And then says,
"Well, maybe that's not what you
Swear
want."
to me. Swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true.
But not for a moment does she buy what he is saying. And that okay could be inferred to mean 100 different things. The Last of Us is a story about human choices, how those choices affect us, and the consequences of those choices. So my personal read on this was always that this is Ellie asking, so what now? I thought my life had a purpose. I thought I might be able to save humanity. But what now? You made the choice for me. And at the same time, I think she is also trying to shield herself from the realization of what he did to save her. We've talked about Ellie's obsession and fascination with power already. So I think if not very explicitly, then at least on a subconscious level, she knows what happened. But it's almost so brutal that she doesn't want it to be true. Did he really kill all of those people just for her? Joel is the one person who kept her safe, the one person she could trust. But now, he too is hiding something. As to what the consequences of all of Joel's actions will be, well, that is for us to find out in the future. Season 2 has already been confirmed, and the game part 2 is there if you really can't wait. And also, last bonus fact, episode 1 of the season was titled When You're Lost in the Darkness. And now the finale completes that, saying, look for the light. First off, that is of course the Firefly saying. So it effectively just hints at the fact that the Firefly storyline in the first season just comes to a close. It begun with the Fireflies and it ends with the Fireflies. Though secondly, it also speaks to Joel. Just like he said earlier in the episode, it was not time that healed all wounds, it was people. And so, when you're lost in the dark, look for the light, look for that one person. And in the bigger story, it also speaks to Ellie, because now, there is no endgame. We reached the Fireflies, we were supposed to get the cure, but here we are. But with that, yes, that is episode 9, that is also season 1, and that is The Last of Us Part 1. Also yes, there is 100% a proper brief retrospective coming, because man, did The Last of Us pull off a feat. I already expect there to be some people saying that this final episode seemed very fast, which is something we will definitely dive into in the proper retrospective, but all things considered, I would easily give the first season a very solid 9.5, if not even higher out of 10. I cannot wait to see how they adapt the future material. Honestly, after seeing Chernobyl and now The Last of Us, I kind of want Craig Mazin to try his hand at something like Monster or Death Note. Unlike a lot of modern directors who have this weird ego thing of wanting to change things just so that it becomes their project, it's clear that Craig has immense respect for the source material. And in Chernobyl's case, just history and accuracy. But anyway, that's just me rambling, whatever the case. I hope to see you back in the proper look back at the first season as a whole, and do let me know what you thought of this episode and the first season. Maybe you'll pop up there too. And that's the video. The incredible ride has come to a close for now, and I already feel empty. Luckily, the first part drops for PC in just a few weeks, so at least we'll get to replay it again. But anyway, with that said, I want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. Without you, there would be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!